Hi, how are you? I am Angel. Welcome to the channel. 31 years after the death of Lorenzo Palacios Quispe, better known as Chacalón, one of the most famous tropical singers in Peru, I want to talk to you about this novel I've just read, Papá Huayco, or Father Mudslide, by the Peruvian writer, art researcher, curator, and DJ Alfredo Villar, as the back cover says here. Once again, the cover caught my attention and made me buy the book. The hills which surround Lima, Chacalón, the pharaoh of Cumbia, and his children, and the aesthetics of the CHICHA party posters so popular in the slums of Lima, CHICHA being a type of cumbia very popular in Peru. Having lived in El Agustino district, in the east of Lima, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm no stranger to Chacalón's music, and I was 8 when he died, but I do remember his music a lot. Published in June 2024 by the Economic Culture Fund of Peru, in 6 chapters and 232 pages, we are shown the life and times of this man, so important in Peruvian popular music, who has transcended and has been considered a hero, a saint of the despised, of the poor, of the discriminated, of the provincial, of the humble, of the quarrelsome. More than a novel, it seems like a compilation of testimonies from people who knew Chacalón. Family, friends, neighbors, artists, producers, people who knew him personally, even a foreigner from Switzerland. Starting with his mother on page 13, Lorenzo's mother came from Ayacucho and his father was from Huancayo, both being provinces in the Andes, and Lorenzo was born in one of the neighborhoods or slums that were being formed around Lima. That child would make his artistic debut at the age of 14, page 22. They don't just talk about him, but Lorenzo himself tells us his story in the first person, of how in those times there was always Creole music and guayno, but tropical music was on the rise, page 33. In the middle of everything, Lorenzo meets Dorita, and despite all the women who prowled around him, his family was Dorita and their 7 children, page 53. 60. Victor Casawaman, creator of a record label and the famous group Celeste, meets Lorenzo, page 62. Victor claims that he discovered and created Chacalón. On this and the following pages, there is leftist propaganda when praising Juan Velasco, Salvador Allende, Victor Jara, and calling Pinochet Dond and Morales Bermudez a traitor. Well, this time I have already done some research on the author of this book, so I read it already prepared and not being disappointed with other people like Marco Cifuentes, Marco Avilés, Gabriela Wiener, or Rocío Silva Santisteban, who I didn't know who they were until after posting my video reviews. Anyway, this praise of the left wing will be seen in a more, let's say, intense way on other pages. Returning to Victor, he tells us at the beginning, Chacalón did not sing almost anything, but his voice was pure feeling, pages 67 and 68. And well, the novel continues and tells us how Lorenzo and his partners decide to create a new group, La Nueva Crema, or The New Cream, inspired by the British rock band Cream. The thing is, at page 74 says, and I quote verbatim, "A true chichero is first a rock and roll player. He must know how to make the guitar roar, scream, fuzz tone, because the city is noise and chaos, and chicha, like rock, is music, to fight against the noise and chaos. With the chicha, you confront the city, you stop it, you seduce it, you flirt with it, you make love to it." Remember that chicha is this type of tropical music you're listening to right now, and chichero is someone who sings, plays, or just likes this music genre. Page 80, of how the song or anthem Muchacho Provinciano that you're listening to right now, or Provincial Boy, is written, and as Victor Cáceres had created this phrase, when Chacalón sings, the hills go down, page 82. Page 85. Here the phrase Papá Huayco or Father Mudslide appears for the first time. The largest chichero stage of the time was the Carpagrau in the city center. There are many social issues in this novel, as in these examples. Page 26. Lorenzo tells us that on the hill there were Sambos, Serranos, Creoles, Cholos, Charapas, Indians, all kinds of people. There are racial categories, as you might guess. 145. Almost all the neighborhoods near the central road, near Huaycán in East Lima, are a red zone of terrorism. 35. The neighborhood became bad. Even Lorenzo himself and his friends, all of them in their teens, halfway between robbery and misbehavior, ended up stealing a sack in La Parada, a famous market in Lima. 37. The law of the hill. This is how we grew and became increasingly tougher and tougher. There was no other choice, little brother. 54. Of how they marginalized him at the US Embassy and did not give him a visa. 87. That idea that people from slums or relatively poor neighborhoods cannot spend, and it is actually the other way around. Maybe they are not as humble as one thinks. I say this because of the people who went to the CHICHA concerts. Something similar is seen on page 107, the myopia of television managers who only discovered CHICHA in the mid-80s. 140, philosophy of life, chamba and vacilón, nothing more. The former means to work hard and the latter having lots of fun. And here begins one of the most uncomfortable parts, the one referring to terrorist violence in Peru. At least the author, in the mouth of the various characters, mostly uses the word terrorism and not the euphemism internal armed conflict. Also, he says terrorists and not armed opposition groups, as Amnesty International likes. Page 127. In urban areas, the police, terrorists, and common criminals are portrayed as equally dangerous. In reality, the former are even depicted as worse, with that phrase, the tombos are the greatest danger, tombo being slang for police officer. 48. Two terrorists give their testimony, Comrade Carlos and Comrade Gabriel. Serving the people with all our heart, a motto I have been reading lately on the networks, especially on Twitter. And well, they claim having eliminated crime, their new democracy state project, the virtues of communism, and so on. An entire chapter of people's war, bringing down the bourgeois state. Anyway, and not only that, but I noticed some ancient, primal, atavistic aspects that's a bit forced. Here we go. Page 157. Three foxes that climb up the hill towards the sky with the colors of blood and revolution and shout things like Gualayo, Pariacaca, Huiracocha, Pachacama, Gonzalo. They are names of pre-Incan gods and the name of the terrorist leader. We will awaken the great Pachacuti, the great Amaru, the Incari. That is, it is like seeking legitimacy by appealing to the pre-Inca, to our ancestors, real and mythological, of the Andean civilization. To me, it seemed close to romanticizing the terrorists because, yeah, the three foxes are in reality human terrorists, but on page 159 they call themselves historical materialists. And I quote verbatim on page 161, "Tonight, that Christian cross will go out and the hill will shine with the symbol of the union of the worker and peasant, the hammer and sickle, with hundreds of paraffin fire cans." And of course, I know, I'm 38, I lived in El Agustino, and I remember that period very well. And I have San Cristobal Hill opposite my house in the distance. More references, and necessary for me, to Andean gods like Illapa, the lightning god. Why do terrorists have so much voice in this chapter and in the book in general? Maybe you are wondering, and I ask myself when reading this book. It's not for pleasure, but rather the figure of the great Chacalón is taken there, calling him Christ of the Hills, page 181. Or on page 182, there is more material. A chichero fighter, revolutionary. Sometimes I think that you are a communist because you are always sharing what you have with others. Of course, at least Chacalón's figure is clean because that voice tells him, I know that deep down you want a revolution to happen. That's it. I know. You don't like it when I try to sweet talk you. You have your ideas. Already on page 183, they almost call him reactionary because Chacalón believed that the terrorists have brainwashed the leaders of the market porters, but they still conclude with, in practice, you are a true communist. Finally, and as if that were not enough, he says, I am convinced that deep down you are one of us, page 184. Unfortunately, all that overflow of Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, Gonzalo thought discourse did not allow me to laugh at the testimony of the famous and very funny vedette Susi Diaz, nor to remember again those sad episodes of the death of our Chacalón at the age of 44. Already on page 175, the author reverses the order of the surnames. It is no longer Lorenzo Palacios Quispe, but Lorenzo Quispe Palacios. It reminded me of Claudia Núñez and her duo Subiaga Gamarra in the book La Mariscala, which I also reviewed. And I also remembered that author because just as she used La Mariscala to flood the book with her feminist and socialist thinking, I have seen something similar in this book, unfortunately, with so much reference to terrorism. Yes, I already know that Chacalón lived in the 1980s and early 90s, but this was too long and strident, at least for me. Well, regarding those ancient primal atavistic terms and aspects, somewhat forced in my opinion, and this time without representatives of terrorism, is also seen in these two examples. Page 9, Apu San Cosme, Apu San Pedro, Apu Santa Clara. I don't know anyone who calls them Apu, spirit of the mountains, but simply Cerro or hill. But since I am not the measure of all things, who knows? Page 23, Lorenzo tells us that his mother could hear the music from the depths of the hills. Well, maybe it happened, maybe it's literary license. There are also many examples of popular speech. Page 9, Mijito. In 38 years of living in East Lima, I haven't heard anyone say that, which means my little son. Only on television in Mexico and Colombia, although you never know. In Peru, we prefer hijito, or little son. Page 9, jodites, nadies, well, that is much more realistic. The correct words are jodiste and nadie. Page 10, because here even the stones and the desert their owners had. You can notice that verb tense and word order. This is very, very Peruvian. Page 31, de entrar instead of entrar, which means to enter. Page 32, oral style, straight, without commas, without full stops. 174, copiar instead of copiar, or cheat, and plagio instead of plagio, which means plagiarism. Page 19, Andean Spanish with strong influence from Quechua in pronunciation, vocabulary, and syntax. Just to finish, I admit that this is a very interesting book due to the large number of testimonies and how we can visualize the personal and professional life of Chacalón, the poor and marginalized areas of the neighborhood, that New Lima as chaotic as it is thriving, as needy as it is entrepreneurial, with a language that is so local, so from the countryside to the city, and it would be the most interesting book if it didn't go through those unnecessarily long things that I have already talked about, which greatly detract from it, and at times one wonders whether the book is really about this great legendary singer. That's all, bye bye.